They shot some footage, which thankfully I never saw, and I hope nobody else ever saw it. I hope it's been burned, because it was very crude video footage of me just standing there with these terrible looking things on my ears. That was the first makeup attempt.
They filmed scenes that were never supposed to see the light of day. Strange, awkward, almost haunting fragments of the Star Trek universe that the public was never meant to witness. Lost makeup tests, failed effects, discarded concepts, and behind-the-scenes arguments that could have changed the course of science fiction forever. These weren't small mistakes. They were pieces of history buried deep within the archives, forgotten for decades, until now. Because today, we're diving into the hidden details, the unseen footage, and the shocking truths that fans were never supposed to see. It's hard to imagine now, but Star Trek wasn't always the sleek, polished vision of the future that we think of today. Long before it became a cultural icon, it was an experiment, risky, messy, and full of accidents. The creators had no idea they were building one of the most influential franchises in history, and in that chaos, there were mistakes, compromises, and creative experiments that left scars across the show's early years. Some of them ended up on screen, others were locked away forever. You see, Star Trek began as a dream, one that nearly never got made. In 1964, Gene Roddenberry pitched an idea that sounded too ambitious for television, a utopian future where humanity had evolved beyond greed and prejudice, exploring the stars not as conquerors, but as explorers. It was a radical idea for the time, a story about hope in an age defined by war and division. When Roddenberry brought the pitch to Desilu Productions, he met Herbert F. Solow, a producer who immediately saw its potential. But the real key to getting Star Trek made wasn't Roddenberry or even Solow. It was Lucille Ball. Yes, that Lucille Ball, the comedy legend behind I Love Lucy. She was the head of Desilu Productions, and even though she didn't fully understand the science fiction concept, she believed in her team. She approved the budget for Star Trek's pilot, a risky move that few executives at the time would have made. Without her, the Enterprise might never have launched. The first pilot, titled The Cage, was filmed in 1964, starring Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike. It was dark, moody, and philosophical. NBC didn't know what to make of it. When they saw the finished episode, they called it too cerebral. In other words, not exciting enough. Most shows would have ended right there, canceled before they even began. But NBC did something almost unheard of. They ordered a second pilot, a second chance. That second attempt changed everything. Titled Where No Man Has Gone Before, it introduced a new captain, William Shatner as James T. Kirk, and a reworked version of Spock. The energy was sharper, the tone lighter, and the chemistry between the cast was undeniable. This was the Star Trek we know today. And yet, even as it reached television screens in 1966, chaos was brewing behind the camera. Desilu was struggling financially. Producing both Star Trek and Mission, Impossible, was draining their budget. At one point, Lucille Ball was pressured to cancel Star Trek entirely, but Herbert Solow convinced her to keep it alive. It was a gamble that nearly bankrupted the studio. What no one realized then was that this little sci-fi show would outlive them all. Even after surviving cancellation scares, Star Trek's first years were far from smooth. The low budget forced the crew to get creative, sometimes a little too creative. Sets were reused endlessly, costumes were patched and repainted, and props were cobbled together from whatever could be found lying around the studio. That thriftiness led to some of the show's most iconic imagery and some of its most embarrassing mistakes. The communicator, for example, was one of the most recognizable props on television, but the original versions were fragile. During filming, they often fell apart in actors' hands, forcing prop master Wah Chung to scramble for fixes between takes. Those same communicators later inspired the design of real-world flip phones, but on set, they were a nightmare. The tricorder, the phaser, even the Enterprise model itself were all held together by ingenuity, glue, and hope. The Enterprise you saw gliding across the stars was actually a 14-foot miniature built from wood and sheet plastic, mounted on a motorized arm to simulate motion. Every warp jump and flyby was a trick of light and double exposure. The illusion worked, but barely. The transporter? That wasn't high-tech CGI magic. It was glitter. Literal glitter sprinkled into a beam of light. Cinematographers filmed the particles as they shimmered, then overlaid the footage and faded the actors in and out to create the illusion of teleportation. Simple, cheap, and brilliant. But these illusions came at a price. The long shooting days, endless retakes, and limited budgets pushed everyone to their limits. Sometimes, things went wrong, terribly wrong, like the first attempt at Spock's ears. The makeup team wanted to make him look alien, but subtle. The first prosthetics were oversized, uneven, and grotesque. Leonard Nimoy later said he hoped the footage had been destroyed. He hated how it made him look. The final version was refined, sleek, iconic, but that first test almost derailed the character entirely. Had those shots been used, Spock might have been remembered as a joke, not a legend. And it wasn't just the ears. The show's lighting was brutal on the actors. The hot studio lamps melted the glue used on prosthetics, causing ears, eyebrows, and other alien appendages to sag mid-scene. Makeup artists would rush in between takes, reattaching Vulcan features that had literally melted off. It was chaos, but it was also part of the magic. No matter what went wrong, the crew kept going because they believed in the mission. As the first season unfolded, the world of Star Trek began to take shape. The bridge of the Enterprise became one of the most recognizable sets in TV history. But eagle-eyed fans who rewatch those early episodes notice strange inconsistencies. Buttons changing color between shots, walls that shift slightly, even background panels that disappear and reappear. The crew was constantly reconfiguring the set between episodes, leading to bizarre continuity errors that slipped through unnoticed. The result? A living, breathing spaceship that was never quite the same from one mission to the next. Behind the camera, tension was growing. William Shatner's commanding presence on screen mirrored his control behind it. He often clashed with Leonard Nimoy over screen time and dialogue. While the two maintained a professional relationship, the rivalry was real. And that rivalry would later explode into something much bigger. Even the show's most famous moments weren't immune to chaos. The 1968 episode, Plato's Stepchildren, featured one of television's first interracial kisses between Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura. It was a cultural milestone, but the scene almost didn't happen. NBC executives feared it would spark controversy in the South. They asked the cast to film two versions, one with the kiss and one without. According to Nichelle Nichols, she and Shatner intentionally sabotaged every take of the non-kiss version, crossing their eyes, fumbling lines, laughing mid-scene, until the producers had no choice but to use the original. The result became history. What fans never saw was the tension and defiance that made that moment possible. Star Trek wasn't just breaking boundaries on screen, it was changing lives off-screen too. When Nichols considered quitting after the first season, she received an unexpected call from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. He told her that her role was too important, that she represented hope, equality, and progress. Those words convinced her to stay. Without that conversation, Star Trek's legacy might have looked very different. By the time the third season aired, the show's future was hanging by a thread. Ratings were low, budgets were smaller than ever, and NBC wanted to move on. Fans were devastated. Letters poured in by the thousands, begging the network to save the show. The campaign worked, for a time. Star Trek limped through one final season before being canceled in 1969. But that wasn't the end. In syndication, it found new life. New generations discovered it, fell in love with it, and turned it into a phenomenon. The mistakes, the flaws, the hidden details, they all became part of its charm. Even today, sharp-eyed viewers are still spotting bloopers that slipped through. A crash mat visible under Kirk and Spock during a fight. A microphone dangling from the ceiling. A reflection revealing the camera crew. None of it was meant to be seen, but it made the show feel human. Imperfect, alive, real. The truth is, those hidden mistakes didn't ruin Star Trek. They made it timeless. But for every charming blooper that slipped through, there were others that could have been disastrous. Some of them so bad, the studio hoped nobody would ever find out. Take the costumes. Those sleek Starfleet uniforms that looked futuristic on screen were, in reality, a nightmare for the cast. The fabric, made from stretch wool, was so tight and itchy that actors would break out in rashes after long shooting days. William Shatner often had to rip open his collar between takes just to breathe. By the end of the first season, the costumes had shrunk from repeated cleaning, leaving the cast squeezed into uniforms a size too small. Continuity became impossible. Between episodes, you can spot differences, collar shapes changing, insignia shifting positions, even color tones that vary depending on the lighting. They were supposed to look like a unified fleet, Instead, the crew often looked like they were wearing mismatched replicas of their own uniforms. The problems extended beyond the fabric. Prop weapons malfunctioned constantly. The original phasers used blinking lights powered by fragile battery packs hidden inside the grip. During one shoot, a battery exploded mid-take, sending sparks across the set. The production couldn't afford replacements, so the props team quietly swapped parts with leftover gadgets from other shows. If you look closely in some episodes, you'll notice the same pieces of plastic showing up as different alien technology from week to week. It was all smoke and mirrors. Somehow, it worked. Behind that illusion was Wah Chang, the quiet genius whose creativity kept Star Trek alive. He designed the communicator, the tricorder, and even the alien creatures that terrified audiences. The famous Gorn, that reptilian monster Captain Kirk fights in the desert, was a man in a rubber suit that nearly suffocated the actor inside. The heat during filming was brutal, and the mask's eye holes fogged instantly. Between takes, the actor had to rip off the headpiece to breathe. When the scene aired, fans saw a slow-moving monster locked in battle with the captain. What they didn't know was that the man inside was moments from passing out. Chang's designs extended to the Enterprise's medical bay, engineering, and even alien artifacts. Each was hand-built, painted, and filmed under impossible deadlines. Today, these props are museum pieces, but at the time, they were cobbled together using whatever materials the team could find. Aluminum scraps, flashlight lenses, even salad bowls. And sometimes, those shortcuts showed. In certain high-definition restorations, you can see fingerprints in the paint or bits of tape holding props together. These were never meant to be visible. They were details hidden by the blur of old cameras, revealed decades later by modern restoration. The effects weren't the only things that cracked under pressure. The actors did too. The pace of filming was relentless, with new episodes shot every 6 days. Long hours, tight budgets, and constant rewrites created tension. Leonard Nimoy, ever the perfectionist, demanded consistency in Spock's logic and behavior. William Shatner, on the other hand, thrived on energy and improvisation. Their different methods sometimes clashed on set. Still, the chemistry between Kirk and Spock, that balance of emotion and intellect, became the heart of the show. Ironically, the real-life friction between the two actors may have been what made their on-screen friendship feel so authentic. But not all conflicts ended well. During the show's later years, the cast became frustrated by how they were treated by the network and the producers. Pay disparities grew, scripts were rushed, and when the series was finally canceled, many of the actors felt blindsided. Yet out of that frustration came something remarkable: the birth of the fan convention movement. Fans refused to let Star Trek die. They organized gatherings, printed newsletters, and exchanged rare production stills and outtakes. At one of those conventions, Gene Roddenberry brought along something unexpected: a reel of bloopers from the original series. Those reels were never meant for the public. They were private gag compilations, edited together for the cast's end-of-season wrap parties. In them, you could see Shatner forgetting lines, Nimoy cracking up, and doors refusing to open on cue. The laughter was infectious. For fans, it was a rare glimpse behind the curtain, the humanity behind the myth. But for Leonard Nimoy, it was anything but funny. When he discovered that Roddenberry had been showing those reels at conventions, he was furious. He felt they undermined the professionalism of the actors and turned their work into a joke. He even wrote Roddenberry a formal letter demanding that he stop. The feud lasted for years, and though they eventually reconciled, the incident left a mark. The very footage meant to celebrate their camaraderie had instead exposed deep cracks within it. It's strange to think that something as innocent as a blooper reel could cause so much turmoil, but that's the paradox of Star Trek. It was a show built on ideals, logic, diplomacy, and unity. Yet behind the scenes, it was as human and flawed as the people who made it. The hidden details that slipped through the cracks remind us that perfection isn't what made it timeless. It was the imperfection, the rough edges, the improvisation, the moments when things didn't go according to plan. Some of those hidden details still spark debate today. Take Spock's famous salute. the Vulcan hand gesture that became a symbol of peace and long life. Most viewers assume it was created for the show, but it actually came from Nimoy's childhood. He had seen Jewish priests perform a similar gesture during a blessing. When the script called for Spock to greet his fellow Vulcans, Nimoy improvised, raising his hand in that split-fingered salute. It felt alien, ancient, and meaningful. The crew loved it. What no one noticed then was how much that one gesture would transcend the show, becoming one of the most recognizable symbols in pop culture. It was an unscripted moment that the world was never meant to see, yet it defined an entire philosophy. Other details were more technical, but just as fascinating. When NASA built its first space shuttle, it was supposed to be named Constitution, but fans had other ideas. Thousands wrote letters asking the government to name it Enterprise instead. NASA agreed, and the shuttle was unveiled with the cast of Star Trek in attendance. A piece of fiction had become real. What few people realize is that the interior of that shuttle was empty. It was never designed for spaceflight. It was a prototype meant for atmospheric tests. But to fans, it didn't matter. The dream had already taken flight. Even the sets themselves carried hidden stories. Because of budget limitations, the same rooms were reused over and over, redressed, repainted, and relit. Captain Kirk's quarters would later become sickbay. The transporter room doubled as alien temples. The walls of Klingon ships were sometimes recycled. Federation corridors flipped upside down. It was a visual sleight of hand that gave the illusion of endless worlds on a shoestring budget. And yet, these recycled sets created continuity without meaning to. Fans later recognized familiar shapes, subtle patterns, and reused furniture pieces, like ghost traces connecting different episodes across time. But the most surprising secrets were the ones hidden in plain sight. Continuity errors that defied logic even within the world of Star Trek. In one early episode, Dr. McCoy's tunic changes mid-scene, blue to green, and back again. In another, Captain Kirk's scars switch sides between shots. Sometimes entire background extras vanished or reappeared within seconds. And yet, no one seemed to care. The stories were so strong that viewers looked past the flaws. Or maybe, deep down, they loved those flaws because they reminded them that the future was still being built, one imperfect frame at a time. Decades later, when the original footage was remastered in high definition, even more hidden details came to light. You can see scuff marks on the bridge floor, fingerprints on control panels, even stray reflections of crew members operating cameras. In one shot, a boom mic dips just out of frame. In another, the edge of the set wall is visible for a split second, revealing that the infinite void of space was really a painted backdrop. All these little fragments, invisible in 1966, became clear in modern clarity, and instead of ruining the magic, they deepened it. The imperfections became a kind of time capsule, proof that what you were seeing wasn't digital trickery. It was human effort, sweat, and creativity caught on film. When you look closely, Star Trek wasn't just predicting the future. It was building it out of cardboard, duct tape, and dreams. Every mistake, every hidden detail, every scene fans were never supposed to see was part of a larger truth, that the pursuit of perfection is less important than the pursuit of possibility. The Enterprise wasn't real, but the belief behind it was, and maybe that's why those imperfections still matter. They remind us that even the most visionary worlds start with rough edges and trial runs. For every fan who has ever marveled at the precision of the Enterprise bridge or the elegance of Spock's logic, there's another who delights in finding those little imperfections hidden in plain sight. The exposed seams, the wobbly walls, the props that were never meant to hold up under scrutiny. They're the fingerprints of an era when imagination mattered more than money, when television was still a frontier, and every new episode was an act of invention. One of the strangest and most fascinating hidden details lies in how the crew managed to make space look alive. The iconic starfields that streamed past the Enterprise were hand-painted on black matte boards, sprinkled with pinpoints of light. For warp-speed shots, the crew simply double-exposed the footage, sliding the boards at different speeds to create the illusion of motion. It was a simple trick, but one that fooled millions. The illusion worked so well that even today, some viewers think they're seeing computer-generated stars, but those moving dots were just paint, glass, and light. and the dedication of a small team making the impossible seem real. Sometimes, the mistakes were so bold they became part of the legend. In one famous scene, a red alert siren blares across the ship, but if you look carefully, you can see a stagehand's arm quickly pulling a switch just off camera to activate the flashing light. In another, a stunt performer takes a fall so hard that the edge of the crash mat is visible beneath him, then hastily kicked out of frame by another actor. These weren't oversights so much as necessary compromises, reminders that the people behind the show were building entire galaxies in a cramped studio. The low-budget creativity that defined Star Trek also created moments of unexpected brilliance. The transporter, born from necessity because the team couldn't afford landing scenes on alien planets, became one of the show's most enduring ideas. The glitter and light trick that replaced expensive shuttlecraft sequences turned into a visual signature that fans still adore. Necessity didn't just breed invention, it defined the show's soul, and sometimes the accidents weren't visible at all. They were hidden in the human stories. Gene Roddenberry's original scripts were constantly rewritten by network censors who feared certain topics were too controversial. Episodes that explored race, gender, or politics were softened, reworded, or delayed. But the writers found clever ways to slip their messages through anyway. Under the surface of alien conflicts and cosmic diplomacy, they smuggled in reflections of the real world. It's easy to miss, but many of those metaphors were the only way they could speak truth on television in the 1960s. And those subtle rebellions, hidden in plain sight, became the reason Star Trek endured long after other shows faded away. Even the relationships between the characters held secret meanings that evolved behind the scenes. Spock's logical calm wasn't just an acting choice, it was a deliberate counterbalance to the chaos of the human crew. Leonard Nimoy fought to preserve that stillness, even when directors wanted him to show more emotion. The quiet tension between Spock's control and Kirk's impulsiveness became a mirror of the human condition. Their friendship, born from friction, reflected the same paradox at the heart of the show, that unity doesn't mean sameness, it means understanding. And then there's Majel Barrett, the unsung voice that guided the Enterprise through countless adventures. She wasn't just Nurse Chapel, she was also the voice of the computer, calm and unshakable, offering logic when everyone else panicked. Decades later, her voice would still echo in new series and films, a constant presence linking generations. What fans never realized was how close she came to being cut from the show entirely. In early development, NBC executives were uncomfortable with a woman in a commanding position on the bridge. They wanted her role reduced or removed. Gene Roddenberry fought to keep her involved, and in the end, she became an indispensable part of Star Trek's DNA. That resilience carried through every era of the franchise. The original series ended, but the dream didn't. In syndication, Star Trek found new life. Young viewers who had never seen it during its original run discovered its world for the first time. Those reruns planted seeds that would grow into movies, spin-offs, and fan movements. But hidden in the archives of those rebroadcasts were still the mistakes. Continuity errors, prop malfunctions, background extras staring into the camera. The very details that were never supposed to be seen became treasures. Fans studied them, cataloged them, shared them in fanzines, and later online. Every slip-up became a story of its own. Some of the most fascinating discoveries came decades later, when remastered editions of the series revealed forgotten artifacts, a stray coffee cup on the edge of a console, an actor's taped mark left visible on the floor, even an off-screen voice shouting cues during a tense scene. These were glimpses of the world beyond the frame, proof that Star Trek wasn't magic, it was craft. And that made it even more magical. There's something poetic about that. The show that imagined a perfect future was built on the imperfect present. The people who created it were ordinary, tired, overworked, often uncertain, but they dared to imagine something extraordinary. When the final episode aired in 1969, few could have guessed that this imperfect little show would one day inspire scientists, engineers, and dreamers across the world. Motorola's Martin Cooper cited the communicator as the inspiration for the first cell phone. NASA named the first space shuttle Enterprise. The very people who watched the show as children went on to build the technologies it predicted. Star Trek didn't just imagine the future, it helped create it. But even as the legacy grew, the hidden moments never disappeared. The raw footage from those early days, the failed takes, the laughter between scenes, the exhausted smiles, remind us that behind every grand idea is a human story. During one interview, Leonard Nimoy recalled watching the old blooper reels at conventions. He admitted they embarrassed him at first. He worried they would diminish the show's integrity. But over time, he realized something profound. Those outtakes didn't mock the show. They celebrated it. They revealed the humanity behind the myth. The reels showed the cast as just people, he said. Not perfect, but human. And that's the paradox that defined Star Trek. The mistakes, the hidden details, the things we were never supposed to see, they're the reason it feels so alive. Because perfection isn't what connects us. Humanity does. Every visible tape mark, every reused prop, every uneven Vulcan ear tells the same story, that greatness is born from imperfection, and imagination doesn't need a flawless canvas to change the world. So the next time you watch the Enterprise soar through the stars, remember the truth hiding behind the illusion. The bridge isn't real. The stars are paint. The crew are actors reading lines on a soundstage held together by plywood and hope. And yet somehow, it all feels more real than reality itself. That's the magic of Star Trek, a show that taught us the future could be better, even if the present was falling apart. In the end, the footage we were never supposed to see, the makeup tests, the bloopers, the unpolished takes, became the heart of its legend. They remind us that even the most visionary worlds are built by people fumbling toward greatness. Maybe that's why we still love it, because Star Trek isn't just about space exploration. It's about human exploration, the messy, imperfect, brilliant kind. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest hidden detail of all. Which moment surprised you the most? Was it the bloopers that broke the illusion, or the unseen sacrifices that made it possible? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and boldly go where no fan has gone before.